Life Audio.
Hey, I'm Rob Teigen.
And I'm Joanna Teigen. Rob and I have been married over 30 years and share an addiction to coffee, bookstores, and Christmas music.
We often debate how many dogs are enough and who should win the voice every season.
We're a neat freak married to a not-so-neat freak, an explorer to a homebody, and an introvert to a people person.
But we do agree that our vows are for always, children are a gift, and prayer is powerful.
Our hope through this podcast is that we can walk with you in caring for the soul of your family. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for joining us today on the Growing Home Together podcast. You know, for most of the years of our marriage, Joanna and I had a pretty traditional thing going on. I went off to work in the morning, she'd kiss me goodbye and stay home with the kids. And then a few years ago, we turned our lives upside down. I left my job, switched to self-employment with Joanna as my partner. We had 25 years of marriage under our belt, but we still had a lot to learn about how to not just be life partners, but also work partners.
That's right. And one thing we noticed right away was that work started to take over our focus. So we'd go on dates and talk about work. And we started spending more evening hours on the job instead of focusing on each other. And, you know, the stress of building something new from the ground up started creating some stress in our marriage, too. And it became pretty clear that we had a lot to learn about work-life balance. And that is why we're so excited to welcome our friends and today's guests, Robert and Kaylee Fukui, to the show. Robert and Kaylee are the co-founders of a business consulting company, and they serve married entrepreneurs in creating strong marriages, strong businesses, and greater work-life balance. So thank you, Robert and Kaylee, for coming back to the show today.
Hey, thank you for having us.
Yes, it's an honor.
We've already had fun before we even hit record, so this should be a really good time.
Yeah, we're excited about it.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. So we are really glad that you guys joined us today, and we have a copy of your brand new book called Tandem. Can you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves for our listeners who maybe didn't listen to our first interview with you guys, and also what kind of led you to write this book?
So I am a third generation entrepreneur. My great grandpa, he was a painting contractor. He would go into big grocery stores like Vons and Albertsons and paint them. And then him and my parents were also invested in real estate together. And then my parents had a small business. And so I grew up in a small business, and the environment had a lot of ups, some challenges. Unfortunately, one of the challenges was the business became the mistress. My dad worked 6 days a week and wasn't home much, and it was really hard on the family. Most kids just want their dad to be home to play with them, throw the ball, just hang out and tell dad jokes. Wrong. And so we just missed having him around.
Yeah. So, and my parents weren't business owners, but they're pastors. So I'm a PK, or pastor's kid. I learned during our book tour that not everybody understands the initial PK. In the South, they call it son of a preacher man. so I have to clarify that. So I'm a preacher's kid, but running a church and running a business is pretty much the same thing. And what I tell a lot of, especially people in ministry, is I think sometimes the expectations of a pastor is even greater on their customers, or basically the congregation. They're expected to be available 24/7. So while sometimes business owners, they choose to be 24/7, but in the case of a church, there's the expectation that they're available 24/7 by a lot of people. So really have a heart for that, because I experienced the same thing growing up that Kaylee did. Was my dad was so focused on the church and the ministry that oftentimes the family got a back seat. So a lot of times after dinner, we'd have family dinner and be together at the dinner table. But then right after dinner, my dad oftentimes would just go into his office and just prepare and pray and study, which, you can see from the outside, say, oh, that's great, he's spending the time with the Lord. But the reality is he's working.
Mm-hmm.
He's really preparing for Sunday or whatever. And, that's not healthy. I mean, there's obviously the need to do God's work, but at the same time, it's still work. So you need to have that balance and create healthy boundaries between ministry and home, so that your priorities of God, and there's still family, and then your ministry. So we felt the same thing, similar things growing up. And, I came from a corporate environment. So I was in marketing and sales for Fortune 500 companies for 25 years. And then about 6 years ago, decided to leave the company and do my own thing and do marketing consulting. But one of the things I saw early on in these small family business was that they were just working way too hard. That they thought sales was the answer, but it really wasn't. They were working so hard and they were already maxed out anyway, that my question to them is, what would more sales do, more volume of customers and sales do, but create more stress? I mean, you're already maxed out. So what good is it to have more volume? So I said, your problem more is margin. You have a lack of margin. You have a lack of margin, not just in profitability, but also time. And so how to run things more efficiently and create greater output without having to put more input was what they needed. And coming from a Fortune 500 background, the corporations that I worked for, we had a lot of the systems and processes in place. We had the financial wisdom to know what kind of margins we need to operate on, so we can make sure we have enough to hire more people, or to purchase software and hardware to make the business more efficient. And so that's what I noticed early on. So when we were helping small family business, we said, well, with this stress in the business, it's also impacting their personal life. And I think the statistic is about 71% of business owners are married. And certainly that played true even in our own clientele, was that majority of them are married, and it was affecting home. And so they started sharing some of these things. And so that's about 4 years ago is when I talked to Kaylee and I said, hey, I think there's an issue here that's not really being addressed. There's help for your marriage, there's help for your business, but nobody's addressing the tension between business and home, and how to really create work-life balance, how to scale the business, but with the intent and objective really is to get more time back so you can dedicate it to the relationships that are most important. And so that's when we started focusing our consulting work in this area, and then hence the book, because we knew this message had to get out there. Because even looking on Amazon right now, there really isn't a book that I've seen, even right now, that really addresses both sides of the issue. We see kind of marriage entrepreneur books out there, but it's focused on relationship, which is important, but it's still not really addressing the business issue that still needs to be fixed too. Because even if your relationship is whole, but you're still stressed out in the business, it's still going to create that layer of stress that you need to address. And so that's kind of a little bit of the story, the journey for us, and then how it kind of led to writing this book.
That's great. One thing I remember when Joanna and I started working together was that there were a lot of people, when we'd tell them what we were doing, that would say, wow, we could never work together, as spouse in the same home together. And, we would kill each other. And so, of course, that was early on. And I'll tell you, Joanna shared earlier, those first few months, I was like, yeah, you guys might. Our story's not been written yet, but why do you think that the idea of partnering with your spouse is so intimidating?
I think it's the inability to really know how to resolve conflict well. In any marriage or any relationship, really, conflict is inevitable, right? And so knowing how to really resolve issues is important, but I think it's a skill that neither of us actually grew up with, right?
Oh yeah, we did. I definitely did not in my house. We either hung up on the phone on each other, we'd walk out in the room, we'd get in the car, we'd storm out, we'd slam the door. So that was our idea of resolving conflict.
And for me, even though my dad's a pastor, you would think they know how to resolve conflict, but they don't teach that in seminary apparently. But in our household is just really avoidance. Well, my mom would bring things up, but my dad doesn't want to talk about it. So then there's avoidance. So of course that's conflict in itself, right? And so things don't get resolved in a healthy way. And so then you start thinking about working together in business. It's challenging enough. If you can't do it in your home life, it's challenging. It's going to be even that much more challenging even in business. And then you're spending more and more time together, which means there's more opportunity for conflict that you're not resolving. So of course, that's just, creating more tension. So it's really that inability to resolve conflict. And that just comes from, we got help. In the book you've read that, we went to 2 years of counseling before we even got married. to help us because we didn't know how to do conflict, because we didn't come from homes that knew how to do conflict. So which means we didn't learn that growing up. So we have to learn it from counseling. But once we did that, it's like, oh, so we really can do anything together because we know how to resolve the issue. Are we still going to have arguments and disagreements? Yes. But we know how to resolve it.
Oh, I love that perspective. Just not to run from conflict, but to actually anticipate it and be ready to meet it head on. That's a really great perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, in your book, you do have a great quote that I wanted to share. Kind of sums up a lot of what you do, I think. You say, being successful in both marriage and business takes teamwork, whether or not you work for the same company. And teamwork starts with having a shared vision, knowing your respective roles, and communicating constantly. I love that. And I think every couple who's listening today is trying really hard to work as a team in their marriage. And that could be in their work life or their parenting or their ministry or running their household. I mean, teamwork applies to every situation of life together, right? And like you said, a couple needs to know their respective roles in those situations to be successful. So I was really curious because I know Rob and I took a while to kind of figure that out for ourselves, but how did you two sort out your roles in your business life together?
Well, I think from the beginning, we kind of started with a vision of what we wanted that to look like for our home life. And then we drew it all out and we thought, okay, what's important to me? We did it individually and then we came together. And then when we came together and talked about it, we were able to integrate the two. And it came out to be like a lot better idea than just one person when you start brainstorming. And we also did that with the business. And then we figured out, okay, what pieces, who's good at what? Because a lot of times we marry someone that's opposite of us and that can really rub us the wrong way. Like Robert's very detailed and it used to drive me nuts. And now I love it. I'm like, honey, can you look at this? Can you help me? Because he's so detailed, you can see it. So being able to work out of each other's giftings is huge. And finding your role, because sometimes we see this happen a lot in business that the supporting spouse will end up in a role that they're not good with. Like for me, QuickBooks is not my thing. And so a lot of times a spouse will put someone in a position just because they need a warm seat, someone to fill it. And it works out horribly because they're bad at it. And then the spouse gets upset because it's not meeting the expectations. And then it causes all kind of friction as opposed to finding something that they love and is good at and plug them in there.
Yeah, it's really about being very intentional from the beginning because, a lot of times, whether it's in marriage or in a business, you're just telling, hey, can you do this? Can you do that? Without really being intentional about understanding, is that really something that they're good at and they would enjoy? But it naturally creates conflict. So like if I did this about telling Kaylee, hey, why don't you handle QuickBooks? And numbers isn't her thing. That's actually my thing, but I didn't want to have to deal with it. Right. And so it created tension. And that's not her gift. And so of course, okay, that doesn't make sense for her to do that. But what I did know she was good at was, I didn't tell her this like this, but she's really good in sales. She's really good at making friends. I mean, she's extroverted. I'm introverted. She can make friends at someone in a total stranger in a coffee shop, and we can be invited over dinner where I just want to place my order and get my latte and get out. Right. Mm-hmm. So, recognizing that, hey, she has a really good gift of just meeting people and just connecting. And so that's a great gift as a salesperson. So I said, hey, for the business, when she was asking me, what can I do to help? I told her, just go make friends.
And I'm like, what? What do you mean make friends? That's not anything.
Yeah, just the outreach, connecting with people, the outreach, the follow-up with people, right? She's much more of a people person. Where as she's talking about, my gift is analysis, vision, planning, creating content and all that. I can go make friends in that too, but at the same time, hey, there's two of us. So why don't we just both operate in our gifts and we'll get a lot more done in a much more efficient manner. But a lot of times in a marriage, it's interesting how when we're dating, opposites attract, and we find our differences endearing, funny, sometimes cute, whatever. But then all of a sudden, once we say I do, those differences all of a sudden become irritations.
Yeah, you're irritating me now.
Yeah.
Irritations. And I go, wait, what happened here? The person hasn't changed.
It's not cute anymore.
It's just, yeah, exactly. And so then we kind of fall into this little spiral of just getting irritated at each other's differences, which of course then clouds our judgment of understanding how we're both uniquely gifted. And hey, how don't we leverage each other's gift as opposed to using it as a point of friction?
And a lot of times too, we don't see our individual gifting. So when you ask somebody else, like when Robert said, go make friends, I'm like, oh, I don't want to do that. That's nothing. I'm not helping out.
Yeah.
I want to do something big, but I wasn't thinking that as a gift.
Yeah. And so
I just thought everybody could do that.
Yeah, we kind of organically started to understand each other's gifts and start to operate in that way. I mean, now, because we, in our own practice, what we do is we use the DISC profile, a personality test, right? Or a personality survey to help our clients understand each other's gifts for themselves, but also for their spouse. And that's a way to kind of speed up how you can identify how you best work together in and out of the business. Like for Kaylee, she's in high I, which is more those charismatic people, the people that are just, energetic, the center of attention. People gravitate towards them, right? So it makes sense to what I just said. Hey, go make friends. And I'm a C, which is much more analytical, more strategic planning, that kind of stuff. So, now we use, a gift test like DISC, and there's tons of them out there, but we're just comfortable with that one. But that's an example of how that would help any couple to try to figure out how to best complement each other and how best to work together.
And it's great for communication styles as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I appreciate so much about your message. I was going to say your book, which that comes in your book, but it's really what you guys do day in and day out through your courses and the different things that you're doing. And speaking is you guys you're in this unique position where you're utilizing your working together to figure out kind of your business skills and how to make that better at life and marriage. And so it's really interesting to hear and watch because we know we need to have vision as a company, right? I mean, as business people and things, we know the company has to have vision. We're either sharing in that, or we're around the water cooler talking about how the company doesn't have vision and we're all struggling. Mm-hmm. And we know what it's like if in a company, if people aren't in the right seats, so to speak,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we know what happens when there's conflict at work, and we know, and so we can recognize that those principles are important there. But then oftentimes we don't put the work in that we need to at home to create that same kind of, or at least try to create that same kind of success, and set things up for success. Like you mentioned, writing down your vision for your marriage, that's just as important for your marriage, if not more important than your business. So I love that. Another quote that you said, or in addition, in that quote that Joanna talked about, you also said that couples need to be communicating constantly. And one thing we've learned as marriage mentors is that the communication, or the skill of communication, takes a lot of effort and practice to learn. So what is, one piece of advice you could give couples to help them communicate really well with each other?
Well, first thing is we're kind of left it on the last question about understanding each other's gifting, which is tied into their communication style. So to kind of relate it to the DISC profile, Kaylee is a high I and also S, which is especially from a decision-making standpoint, she's more of an S than an I, where she's very thoughtful, but also she weighs a lot of options, and which means she can take a little bit longer than I'd like to make a decision. Where I'm a C, I'm a high analytical, and then by the time I'm asking her the question, basically, I've already got ideas. And so when I'm posing a question to her, then she needs to mull it over, but I want an answer because I've already kind of thought it out, which is obviously unfair.
Yeah, because he's been thinking about it for all this time, you guys. And then he pops it on me and wants an answer in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
So understanding each other's differences and communication styles and the way you process information is very important. And especially as an introvert, I'm an internal processor. So I mull it over in my head. Kaylee's an external processor. So she's talking about it as she's trying to figure out a solution or just talk through the problem, right? And so as an internal processor, when she's talking it out, I take it as she's made a decision. And if I don't agree with what she's saying, I'm immediately jumping to conclusions and saying, no, you're wrong, and, paraphrasing. And then we get into an argument.
Because I feel like he's not listening to me.
Right. And
so then I talk louder.
And I'm kind of not listening.
Listen.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I've learned, or what we've learned, is that, well, she's an external processor. So just because she's talking doesn't mean she's telling me a solution or her answer. She needs to work through it. So now we just talk through a situation, an issue, right?
And if I can preface that ahead of time, it really helps him a lot. Otherwise, he's trying to give me all these different solutions and solve my problem. And then that really frustrates me because I'm like, that's not what I'm wanting.
Yeah. So this is, this is kind of stereotyping, but, men usually are problem solvers and women are usually want more empathy or just to be heard, right? And so as Kaylee's talking, I want to solve her problem that doesn't need solving. And so, of course, that becomes irritating. So as Kaylee was saying, like, we have these ground rules, and one of them is when you're going to present some information or you're going to present something, if you can remember, preface it by saying, I either need a solution or I just need you to listen. So that helps me get in the right frame of mind. Don't come out with solutions when she doesn't need a solution. She just needs to be heard. And then I'm just talking it through with her. I'm just listening and just talking it through with her. And even if the other person forgets to preface it, when you get into these middle of these arguments, because obviously we're on a different page, then if someone stops, I'll stop and just say, okay, honey, what do you need from me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she could say, okay, I just need a solution, or I just need you to listen.
And sometimes it's the least likely thing he's going to expect. One time I said I wanted a hug, and I think he was so disappointed.
I wasn't disappointed. I kind of was. Because I had 5 solutions to your problem.
And all it was a hug.
Yeah, he's like, a hug?
Yeah, I was studying.
Yeah. And he looked at me like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. And so then he gave me a hug, and then he looked at me, and I walked away, and he's like looking at me like,
that's it?
Yeah. He's like, seriously? I had all these 5 solutions.
What do I do with these 5 solutions? These are great.
You guys are meddling a little bit because, I'm more like Kaylee, though. I tend to be a verbal processor, and I tend to be take longer to make decisions. Like Joanna tends to be a little bit more like black and white and that kind of thing. So we've been through that. But what I keep hearing in your, as you talk about conflict resolution and communication and all these things, is like, I think sometimes we don't think it should be hard or work in marriage. Like we expect it to be in business, but we don't expect like you guys had to set ground rules. You had to go through the DISC, just like a lot of companies do those kind of personality assessments in the company. But you guys did that as a couple, and you had to set ground rules so that you guys would communicate better. And I mean, it's work to make it work well, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to better understand the Bible and give biblical answers to those who ask you about your faith? Hi, this is Perseus Fukui, host of the Sound Reasoning Podcast Show. Listen to us weekly as we bring the truth often found in the ivory towers of seminary down to the steeple towers of the local church. Join me along with many of the nation's top theologians as we offer answers to life-tough questions from an apologetic perspective. Subscribe to the show at lifeaudio.com.
Are you concerned about tensions in the Middle East? Do you wonder where we're currently at in the biblical timeline? Are we really in the last days? Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Carl Muller with the Inside the Epicenter podcast. Every week, my co-host, best-selling author Joel Rosenberg and I answer those questions and more. You'll hear inside knowledge of our meetings with leaders at the highest levels of government in the U.S., Israel, and the Middle East, equipping you to filter the news with biblically sound insights. Find Inside the Epicenter on your favorite podcast app or go to joshuafund.com to listen and subscribe.
Yeah. And I like what you said, just that question that you pose is, what do you need from me? And I think just saying that out loud could alleviate so much tension. I mean, I think because Rob is an external processor, what happens with me is he'll rattle off, maybe we could do A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And what I'm hearing is now I have 7 new tasks to accomplish. And so my stress goes through the roof because I'm like, oh my goodness. And if instead of me immediately taking his brainstorming as task assignment and just said, well, what do you need from me? I think that would dial me down in about a second. That's awesome.
A hug. I just need a hug.
Yes, and I always need a hug.
Rob needs a hug. Yeah, because we get what we get stuck in these cycle of insanity, is where everybody's talking, nobody's listening, and all you're doing is triggering each other, and everybody's responding. And so, just stopping and asking that question helps the other person, and both of you really just like settle down and go, okay, what do we need here? What's going on, and what do we need here? And once we understand what the other person needs, then it'll be productive, because really, when we're in these arguments, we're just throwing stuff at the wall and hopefully something sticks, right?
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's not the issue we think it is.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
It's
that's very true. Mm-hmm.
Something from childhood or something got triggered.
Yeah, it's a trigger. Usually we're getting triggered by something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we find that a lot of times we'll be fighting over or disagreeing. Maybe that's too strong. Yeah. We do fight sometimes, but yeah, we'll be in a disagreement over something, and it can be an issue or something, but there's an insecurity there, or there's something else underneath it, and we're wondering, like, why has this escalated over keys or something like that, and there's usually, like you said, other things, other feelings that we need to get to the bottom of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if a couple is noticing that they are consistently triggered by the same sort of situation, what would you suggest as a way to maybe be able to unearth that and understand what's driving that?
Well, I journal a lot. I try and journal every day. So maybe journaling about it, talking with your spouse about it. If you need help, we're all about reaching out and getting help as well.
Yeah, I mean, just taken from counseling, I mean, what we uncovered the triggers, or what triggers each other, because the trigger's always pretty much tied to some kind of childhood memory. And so, like, for example, if, Kaylee is asking me, say I came home late, I didn't call or text or whatever, tell her I'm late, and she gets upset at me. And then that triggers me, because I'm like, wait, you don't trust me? And that's because, my dad was a very micromanager, meaning that he was very critical of everything I did. And so that was the trigger, that it was like criticism. And so when she would just ask me, it's just if you're on the outside listening to this, you're just like, well, she just, wants to know, are you coming home? Right? Should I have dinner ready or not? Is everything okay? Because I usually do call, and the one time I don't call is when it's a little unusual, and just make sure, okay. But then when she asked me that question, and I'm thinking, well, I call you all the time, but this one time, why can't you forgive me? And I just go off, right? And it's just a trigger from childhood, because my dad was critical. The only time he would really say something to me was really to correct me, and so that's the trigger. And so now Kaylee says, okay, well, when she's going to ask a question like this, that she thinks might be a trigger, she'll say, I'm not being critical. I just want to understand, you didn't call, or whatever, you didn't text.
What time you think you'll be home?
Yeah. So to kind of get to the bottom of the trigger is usually kind of go into the childhood memory. What's the memory that's tied to based on that? And once you understand the trigger, both couples will start to understand. Like for me, then I understand, oh, now I know why I got triggered by Kaylee's question. And so I can be a little bit more cognizant about not reacting or overreacting. And then Kaylee, now she knows how to kind of present, the question.
Because we've talked about it. And now I'm aware of what his triggers are. So I'm like, okay, this could get a little touchy. So now I have more empathy for him. Why, if he's getting upset when I'm asking him, because I can realize it's not about me.
Yeah. And then the other one, I know for you, honey, was, not walking out in the middle of an argument. Don't just walk out.
Right. Because in my family, people get mad and just walk out all the time, get in the car, storm out of the driveway. And so we have one of our goals, it's not a goal. Ground rules. Thank you. Is like, if you're upset with each other, because we come up with our ground rules from the things that have triggered us from our past. And so since I had people walking out on me all the time and they're mad, ground rule was, if Robert's upset with me, that
And I need to cool off.
yeah, that he just says, you know what, I love you. I know we're having this discussion right now. I need to cool off. And I need 15 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. But I will be back. And then you keep your promise. You come back at that time. And then we talk about the situation again.
Yeah.
But I know in my heart, he's not abandoning me. I don't have to think, oh my gosh, is he not coming back? Is he like left me?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just when he says that, it kind of eases my mind. And then I'm like, okay, I can do it.
And setting the time to come back and sticking to it is important too, because you don't want to leave the other person hanging.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you may not be going for a walk, but you might just say, hey, I need to think about this. But then make an agreement of when you're going to come back and talk about it and finish it off. Because too often when you don't set a time to talk about it again, it doesn't get talked about again. It's like the other person's hoping you'll forget.
Mm-hmm.
just keep it on the rug. So it's so important to stick to your agreement, because otherwise, if you don't, then obviously you're breaking trust, and then your spouse isn't going to believe you next time you say something like that. So it's so important to, one, set the time to come back and talk about it, so it settles the other person down, so they know, okay, we're not going to talk about it now, but at least I know when we're going to talk about it. So that kind of calms you down. But then the second step is then stick to it.
That makes like a lot of sense. Yeah. Well, I have to say, in the time that we've known you, if I had to describe your marriage in one word, it would probably be fun. I mean, you guys are always traveling to interesting places. You're making memories. I mean, following along on social media with your book tour recently was just great.
It was just a great excuse to travel and have fun, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
You read into that, Rob.
Yeah, but I'm sitting here and I was like, were they always the fun couple, or is this something that you've actually had to work toward with each other?
Well, I think we always like to have fun. We both like to travel. So that was a great common, thread we had from the beginning. But, as you get going through life and through marriage, you got to be very intentional about keeping up the fun. And so as we were going into business for ourselves, as we started visioning our life, what do we want our life to be like, not just for the future, but even in the present. That was part of the vision. It's like, okay, we want to have a business, we want to succeed, but we always want to make sure we have fun. So we have to create protective time in our calendar to make sure we're having fun. Because as life goes on, things just get busier, more things pile on. So even though we started out having fun, especially in dating, it's easy to start out having fun. But then once you get married, life goes on, more and more, more and more things get piled on top of you from business and everything else. You got to be very intentional to staying on top, making sure you prioritize those things that are important to you, like having fun.
Yeah, and that's where the time margin comes in, because we, especially doing our book tour, we had to say no to a lot of things, you guys, with boundaries, because there's so many things we wanted to do, and we loved it. Would have loved to have done it, but there was no way that we could have done that in the book tour. So we had to say no so that we could be intentionally about working and putting fun in. Otherwise, the book tour would have just been worked the whole way through.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because that's part of our vision. That's, part of our vision itself in life is just, let's work, but let's make sure we have fun. So when we started talking about the book tour, or even before the book tour, like whenever we had a client out of state or out of the area to go visit or get invited to speak or do a workshop or whatever, we'd always say, can we carve out time even before or after the event to have fun?
Yeah.
And because obviously then, because I went in the corporate environment, I was on trips a lot, and you go to these great locations, but you don't have time to have fun because you're just in meetings all day or all week. And then you just come back home because you're just tired. You don't want to stay any longer. And plus she's not with me. So of course I don't want to just stay by myself because that's kind of awkward. But so that was our thing, was like, hey, we want to work and have fun. And since we both like to travel, whenever there's that opportunity to travel, let's see if we can plan in the fun on top of it.
Add a couple days to it, the trip.
And so it's just kind of be intentional about those things, and really and again, protecting that time. We like to have fun, so we got to protect that time to have fun. We got to make sure, no matter how busy our schedule gets, that, hey, once a month or once a quarter, every year, we got to do these things, right?
Well, and so often we see it in the entrepreneurial world. It's very isolated, and you kind of live on this island by yourself. You feel like, or with your family. But how often do we go out and play and have fun anymore? It's like, you don't hear of it very much. We're going to work. Or the kids got baseball, they got soccer, they got all these activities, and they got all-stars. That could take a whole summer right there if they keep winning, So it's like, but families getting out and having fun. It's like,
and so there's the tension there, with a lot of entrepreneurs that face, it's like, well, we don't have time to have fun, and we gotta work the business. And, when we get to retirement or when we hit a certain milestone in business, then we'll relax a little bit more. But sadly, we've seen that it just never happens. And then by the time they get up to retirement, a lot of times they have health challenges, and they can't enjoy the things they wanted to do that they initially, thought they would do when they retire. And the reality is, when you even stop to have fun, even it doesn't have to be a long 6-week road trip like we did, but even if it's just a weekend or every quarter or something like that, the reality is that when you take that time to have fun and relax and be with each other, it actually leads to more productivity in business. Because, as Christians, number one, the Sabbath, obeying the Sabbath is biblical. It's part of the 10 Commandments. And it's part for your spiritual recovery and refreshment, but it's also for your physical, mental, and emotional. Because there's all kinds of science out there, right? That we know that in rest is when your body is most productive. It repairs itself, right? Whenever you break an arm or something like that, what do they say? Lay off it, rest it, right? If you have a nervous breakdown, it's rest. And your body, like when you're in your growing up years, that's when your body grows and muscles develop, is in rest. So, like if you're an athlete, you're tearing down your muscles when you're working out, but it's in that rest and recovery is when the muscles strengthen. And so, and then even in business, when you're more restful, your mind is more creative and more innovative. You think more clearly, you're more focused, right? But if you're just going, you're just reacting to life, and you're actually less productive in business, and you're less creative, you're less innovative, you have less clarity, and you start to lose focus because you're just more stressed.
Right. And I think that this is a great time to actually have this topic come up in conversation, because most of us have flipped over our calendars to the new year and we have all this time in front of us. And I would say that the longer Rob and I are married, the farther in advance we're starting to plan our quality time. Like we have March plans that will have been in place for 4 months before they happen. We had plans last fall to go away for a marriage retreat, and we'd had those plans on the calendar for 4 or 5 months in advance. So planning for us is the ticket. If we think that we're just going to spontaneously go out to breakfast, it's probably not going to happen.
Exactly.
So we rely really heavily on our calendar. And I think younger me would have said, well, without spontaneity, it's not as much fun. But that's actually not true. We're finding that the anticipation actually adds to it. So we're just utilizing our calendars way more to make sure that
you can plan for spontaneity. The spontaneity is in what you do. The spontaneity could be in what you do. So you just carve out the time in your calendar, and then you can still allow the spontaneity, and you just say, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to wake up today, or, in 5 weeks, and this is, and then we'll see what we do. Right.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Because, I'm the planner, she's the spontaneous one. And so, in our trips or in our vacations, some things are planned, but then we also just carve out time to just be spontaneous.
Right? Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, we underestimate, I think, how powerful that piece is and why we are stressed. Because like we've been talking through this podcast, the conflict management and the communication, and sometimes all of that can seem like a lot of work. Like you guys, a lot of us didn't come into our marriages just naturally knowing how to do this or having this modeled for us. And so you've got to add the fun in too. You've got to remember why you fell in love and experience life together and enjoy each other. And if that's completely carved out of your relationship, it's going to be harder to succeed at business or life. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so I love that. And that may be a big piece of what I was going to ask you guys next. But I think for Joanna and I, probably one of the biggest struggles we had when we started working full-time together was the stress. It was hard to go from a predictable paycheck to not knowing what was going to come in and know, health insurance, and it was tough to give grace to each other when we were going through the learning curve of trying to figure out what this would look like and if we were going to even make our goals. There was that pressure of, is this going to work? Am I going to have to go back and find a job? And what's that going to look? All that whole thing. So, how do you two manage your stress as a couple so that it doesn't hurt your business and your relationship?
We have weekly meetings every Monday at 3:30. We talk about these kind of things. And so I'd be like, is there going to be money coming in? What's going on? Because sometimes, I just kind of felt like out of the loop. So then we'd have these meetings and Robert would go over and say, okay, this is what I'm working on. These are the projects. This is what I think I have coming in. I've talked to such and such client, or I have this many quotes out that I'm waiting to get back. I have this many more people that I want to contact. So he would communicate where he was at in the whole sales funnel. And then that would help me a lot. I'm like, oh, okay, you think you have this big project coming in and you'll know in the next couple of days. That would kind of like ease down my stress. Like, okay, so there looks like there's a big probability we will have a new client or customers coming in. So that helped me a lot. And then we would go over the calendar for the week or for the month, so we'd know where we stand. There might be a season where he had to work a lot. And then he would say, okay, the next 2 weeks, I'm going to work really hard. I got to put in a lot of hours, but then I'm going to take you out on Saturday night, or we could do a date night at home, or depending on how much money we had. So with me, it really helped ease my mind with knowing what the expectations are and where we're at ahead of time, as opposed to always wondering like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
I think just that constant communication, what's going on, what's on your mind, and the stress you're, one person could be the sounding board to alleviate the stress from me. So if it's, something's on my mind or whatever, just being able to speak it out without, I don't need a fix, right?
Mm-hmm.
We just need to kind of release that stress and the stress that's on your mind. That's very helpful, of course. So that's, and then of course on her end for Kaylee, it's just, so she knows she's not in the dark. And so, she can manage that stress, because sometimes she might not know what's going on, but even sometimes just the unknown creates stress,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I know, which is creating stress, but she doesn't know, but still creates stress because she doesn't know what's going on, right?
Right.
So being that constant communication with each other back and forth, and just supporting each other emotionally, mentally is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just the practical matter of you just have to be able to decompress, right? Even alone as well as together. You talk about the date nights, but even for me, like I like to golf. So, hey, I just got to go make sure I have time to go out with my buddies and golf every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just so, that's very
I'll get together with the girls.
Mm-hmm.
And she gets together for the girls. And we got to have that time away from each other too. And just that time to just decompress.
Mm-hmm.
And then also together, we can just talk through some things and have fun. And then also talk through some things. Then that just keeps the stress level at a minimum. And it's better to be proactive about dealing with the stress, right, than to allow the stress to build up. I mean, that's when breakdowns happen, is because it's just building up,
Mm-hmm.
up. You're not doing anything to alleviate the stress,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
because you're bottling up inside, not even sharing it with your spouse or even a friend or a mentor or whatever. And then you're not doing anything to relieve it, like taking a little time away, right? You're just working, because the stress that the business isn't working well, you start putting in more time in.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the kind of the slippery slope that a lot of entrepreneurs face, is that when they're stressed in the business, they tend to put more time into it, and it just makes it worse.
Hey everyone, Mentor Mama here from the Coffee and Bible Time podcast, where we encourage you to delight in God's Word and thrive in your Christian walk. Our podcast is an offshoot from our main platform, YouTube, where our followers have formed a loving and caring community. We also love coffee, and we'd love to get to know you. So come join our podcast on lifeaudio.com or search Coffee and Bible Times podcast on your favorite podcast platform.
I'm Monica Schmelter, and on the Bridges podcast, we offer you hope for the journey. Whether you are in a season of waiting, navigating a busy career and family, or working through disappointment, the Bridges podcast provides truth and grace for everyday life. The podcast is Bridges with Monica Schmelter, and you can listen and subscribe at lifeaudio.com.
Actually.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And then at the end, just hug it out, right, Kaylee?
Yeah. Hug it out. Hug it out. Hug it out.
Yeah, absolutely. Works
Bring
for
it
me.
in. Bring it in.
Yeah. And you must be reading my mind because with that idea of time, we've heard you say over and over, you do not, and actually you shouldn't, work 18 hours a day to be successful. And I really think you must know something about time management that the rest of us all really need to hear. So what are some of your secrets for how to structure your time so you don't work 18 hours a day?
Boundaries is one. It's interesting when we create, like I hear a lot of this about think outside the box. Well, I like to say think within the box, because we all work within some boundaries and some limitations anyway. I mean, there's only 24 hours in a day, right? But instead of just allowing you to just work more hours, right? Just say, okay, within 8 hours or 9 hours, what can I do to accomplish, what are the main things I want to accomplish today? And so creating boundaries and then figuring out how do I be productive in the time I have is going to help you become more innovative and creative in what to do. And also force you to look at what are some of the things that are getting in the way of being more productive and how can I eliminate it?
Mm-hmm.
Say no to certain things, or maybe delegate it to somebody else, or even automate it. So we have an acronym, it's ADE, automate, delegate, eliminate. When you look at all the tasks you have in the business, or just in life in general, of all the tasks that you have, in business, like what are the top 2 or 3 things that you're most gifted at that you should be spending your time in? And then with the rest of the stuff, how do you get rid of it, get it off your plate somehow by either automating it, delegating it, or eliminating it? And it's going to force you to have to say no to certain things. But it's saying no to the low priority things. But we tend to say yes to the low priority things because it's the stuff, we need to do, like answering emails or customer service issues or whatever. But it also bogs you down from doing the things that you need to do to really grow the business, right? And so how do you, even though you might need to deal with some of these things, but how do you get it off your plate, maybe have somebody else do it, or maybe some of these emails, you don't always have to respond to them right away, or sometimes at all.
Yeah, because you check yours three times a day.
Yeah, and so I don't check it all during the day, but just like 3 times a day, just carving out time when to do it so I can be more efficient with it. But all that to say is you got to look at where you're spending your time. And then there's probably a lot of things that you do that's getting away for being productive. And you got to figure out what to do with those things. And a lot of times it's just saying no to certain things.
Yeah, one of our clients, they're in construction, and he had this great team, he said, working for him. And he was thought he had to do it all himself. He would sometimes even pick up a shovel and he'd be helping. And then we had to help hold his hand through the process. We're like, okay, you said you had a great team. Let's turn it over to them. I'm sure they're going to do fine. So he was able to eventually do that. And he says, oh my gosh, things run so much more smoothly when I'm not there.
Oh.
And now he's got all this time on his hands. He's like, oh my gosh, to do all the stuff he's been wanting to do, to be innovative. And
yeah. And unfortunately, he got to that point because we were telling him for months, you need to do this. But he just was micromanaging, basically. He just felt he needed to control all this stuff. And it wasn't until he was pretty much close to nervous breakdown.
Right.
He had to say, he came into the office one day and said, you guys got to deal with, talk to his wife. You guys got to deal with it. I can't.
Their marriage wasn't in good shape.
Is what it came down to. And that's when he realized that, oh my gosh, like the less I do, the more things get done.
Yeah.
So that's a favorite quote we have now. We use all the time because he said, oh my gosh, I realized I was doing way too much and I didn't need to. Right. And so even if you're working for yourself, because you're thinking, well, maybe I don't have a team, but it goes back to what do you need to quit doing? So like when I was transitioning from pharmaceuticals to consulting full time, I had to work the full-time job while I was building the consulting business. So which means I had to work nights, right? So there's no getting away from that. But unfortunately, it was going till 2 a.m. in the morning working. And so by the time Friday and Saturday hit and the weekend hit, I was just exhausted, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. And so that's when I was like, this isn't God's best, right? 1, I'm tired. 2, I'm not even present for Kaylee. So even though I wasn't working technically on the weekend, I was exhausted and I wasn't even emotionally present, right? Or mentally present. So that's when I had to say, okay, there's got to be a better way. because I don't think, even in this transition, I don't believe God wants me to sacrifice everything, including my health and, of course, time with Kaylee. That I've got it. How about if I go, instead of going to bed at 2 a.m., if I can at least get to bed by 11 o'clock, that'll be healthy enough. So by the time Friday hits, I'm still awake. Right?
Yeah.
Right. And so that's when I just looked at the calendar and looked at all the things I was doing. And it's like, there's certain things I'm doing, like there's calls or meetings I'm doing that I probably don't need to take. I shouldn't take. It's kind of, they're time wasters. They're people that are maybe just picking my brain, but aren't going to hire me. Right. There's things like that. There's maybe some emails there's tons of emails coming through. And I'm like, most of the stuff is junk. I don't need to deal with these things. Or I'd say, I'll get back to it later. Or I'll tell them on my email, hey, give me a week and I'll get back to you later. And then there's this busy work that I was doing that I was like, this isn't productive. There's always things we can do, right? We can always find things to do, but you got to evaluate, are these things actually productive? And will this move the needle forward? And so that's when I have to really focus my time and energy on the things that was most productive, the things I was most productive at, and then saying no to a lot of things. And some of the no thing wasn't like no forever. It was just no for the moment. Right?
No
Or
for
no
now.
Yeah.
And so even like volunteering at church, I mean, I just have to say no for now. So there's all these things that fill your calendar, and you have to kind of evaluate, are these productive? And then what do I do with some of this stuff that's not?
Yeah. And I think sometimes that busyness is a little bit sneaky, because sometimes busyness can give you a sense of productivity. And if you are feeling insecure that, gosh, I'm really not getting there, just being busy can delude you into thinking that you are. And so I think that's one actual blessing of working a partnership with your spouse, is you have an outside person who knows you really well. You can't hide the effects of your busyness from your spouse. And they're in a unique position to be able to speak into that and say, hey, I think you've moved off center and I don't think you're okay. And so that can be a real gift to each other to kind of, help each other stay in bounds, as you were saying.
Yeah, that busy is that 4-letter word that we've all kind of got caught up into.
Like a badge of honor, people think it is. Oh, how are you? Busy, 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 busy. I'm like, frankly, I don't want to be busy. I could be busy doing nothing, I mean, I want to be productive.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and you say in tandem, in the book, you say several times, if you're succeeding at business, but you're not in that life balance or at home, in your marriage, or even in some of those areas of health and things like that, then you're not really succeeding, So if you're taking 15 hours of your day to be successful at work, but other things are suffering, it's gonna catch up with you.
Yeah, and that's the top entrepreneur's regret as they get older, is not spending enough time with family, in their younger years, and because it's time you don't get back.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
You want to build memories, but it's always about later, and then you miss the present.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what good is that?
Yeah. And I would say for Joanna and I, the most important habit that we've cultivated to help us in all of these areas we've been talking about today, managing stress, setting priorities, keeping open communication, has been regular time in prayer. And so I would love to ask, how would you say your faith makes an impact on your life together?
Kind of sounds similar to you. I mean, we start our morning in prayer, and that's something we just relatively recently adopted, maybe 3 years ago, just a little bit before COVID, even though I grew up in the church, but we didn't regularly pray together outside of meals, right? And so it was, I don't know what prompted us to do it, but we just started doing it. First thing, she has her alone time, I have my alone and quiet time too, but then we come together in prayer before we get started for the day. And we just started doing that a few years ago, and it's made a huge difference. And also, there's a research out of the Pew, PEW, the Pew Research Group, many years ago, that did a survey of over 1,100 couples that actively pray together daily, and not just at mealtime, but we're talking about kind of what we're talking about, intentional prayer with each other. And only one couple out of those over 1,100 actually got a divorce. And so if you ever heard that saying, the couple that prays together stays together, well, according to research, it's true. And then also psychology will show you that you can't praise each other and be critical of each other at the same time.
Yeah.
It's impossible. So which means starting your day in prayer and blessing each other every day, sets the tone for the day, right? We always talk about habits, and how you start the day really sets the tone. So why not start in prayer? It's healthy, it's spiritual, it's just so uplifting and encourages the other person, each other, right? And so doing that daily habit of starting in prayer, bringing your spiritual life in, starting day with God as the centerpiece of your marriage, totally changes things.
Yeah, what wife wouldn't want to have their husband pray for them every day, every morning?
Yeah, for sure. With that in mind, would one of you be willing to pray for the husbands and wives listening today who want to grow in their teamwork and in the joy in their marriage?
Sure.
Love
Start,
to.
honey.
Dear Lord, we just thank you for Joanna and Rob and all the listeners, Lord. And I just pray peace and harmony over their households, Lord. And I pray over their businesses, Lord, that they will be on the same page, that they will be united as one, Lord, with the vision, and that they will put you first, Lord, because you are the ruler over all mankind, Lord. And you have the perfect plan for all of our lives, Lord. So we just thank you for that.
Lord, we just want to lift up Rob and Joanna, the family, and everyone that's listening today. Lord, you have a perfect plan and will for everyone. And we just pray over all these marriages represented. And we just pray over all the husbands and wives that, yes, Lord, just let them see each other the way you see them, Lord. And we just pray that you give them that new set of eyes, like almost like a reset of see each other the way they saw each other the first time they met and caught eyes and just fell in love, right? None of us have really changed. It's just all the circumstances and emotions and experiences that have maybe changed us a little bit of how our outlook or viewpoint is from each other. But the reality is, Lord, we're all the same people. We're both the same people that we fell in love with each other those many years ago, or maybe just recently. And we just pray you just reset everyone's focus and attention and attitude towards each other, just to basically back to when they first fell in love. And know that you're on the same team, that we want the same things for each other. We want each other to succeed. And don't let the differences become a hindrance, but let the differences become the thing, that glue that brings them together, that will help them see that in their differences, that helps them support each other in the areas that they're weak, the other person's strong. And that you can use those differences to be the power couples that you've created, that you brought them together to be. So Lord, we just thank you for having this opportunity to share our experience and our journey to everyone that's listening. And we pray just a blessing and favor of all of them, and just a great 2023. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. Wow. Well, I'm sure that everybody listening is going to want to get to know you better and learn more about your resources. You have so much great stuff, and your book, Tandem. So where is the best place to connect with you online?
Well, you can start with our website's marriedentrepreneur.co. And in it is our podcast and the resources and all that, and links to our book. And then you can follow us on social. Both Instagram and Facebook is at Power Couples by Design. And so you can follow our journey there and see if we see us having fun. And on LinkedIn, just connect with our names, Robert Fukui and Kaylee Fukui. You can connect with us on LinkedIn there. Right?
And then our podcast is Power Up Your Marriage and Family.
Okay, great.
Your marriage and business.
Oh, Power Up Your Marriage and Business.
Yeah, and we will be sure to have links to all that great stuff in the show notes. So be sure to check those out.
Yes, and thanks so much, Robert and Kaylee. It's been great spending this time with you today.
Yeah, always a pleasure. It's always fun catching up and hearing your journeys.
Yes, boy.
What you're up to next.
Yes.
Adventures.
Yes. And thank you, friends, for joining us today on the Growing Home Together podcast. We would love to connect with you as well on our website, growinghometogether.com, where you will find lots of great resources for your marriage to help you guys grow closer to God and each other. At Growing Home Together, we're caring for the soul of your family.
And we're growing home together with you. Bye-bye.
Bye.